You do not lose control of your files all at once. You lose it quietly during an update behind a screen you were never asked to read carefully. For hundreds of millions of Windows users, personal files have already been copied to Microsoft servers without clear permission. Not through a mistake, not through a setting they knowingly enabled, but through OneDrive, Microsoft's cloud storage service, activating itself as part of routine Windows updates. This shift began accelerating in 2024. During clean installations of Windows 11, OneDrive folder backup started enabling itself automatically, moving desktop, documents, and pictures into the cloud by default. For many users, this happened without meaningful consent and without a clear explanation of the consequences. When users later tried to turn it off, the result was often worse than expected. Local files disappeared, folders were replaced. In some cases, users were left staring at a single desktop, shortcut asking where their files had gone. What followed was confusion, panic, and a growing realization that backing out was not as simple as opting out. This is not just about lost files. It is about a cloud service that behaves in ways users compare to ransomware, about legal experts questioning whether these practices push the limits of consumer protection law, and about millions of people discovering that they no longer fully control where their data lives. Over the next few minutes, this video will show exactly how OneDrive activates without meaningful consent, why disabling it can remove access to your files, and what you need to do now to protect your data before another update makes the decision for you. Microsoft launched OneDrive in 2007 as a straightforward cloud storage service. It offered 5 GB of free storage to anyone with a Microsoft account, positioning it as a convenient way to back up files and access them across devices. By 2024, OneDrive had evolved into a deeply integrated part of Windows. It was embedded into File Explorer, Office applications, and the Windows setup process itself. Microsoft promoted OneDrive folder backup as a safety feature designed to protect important files from hardware failure or theft. According to official descriptions, the service automatically syncs desktop, documents, and pictures folders to the cloud. The promise was peace of mind. If your device fails, your files are still there, ready to restore. For users who actively choose cloud storage, this integration can be useful. The problem is not what OneDrive does, it is how Microsoft turns it on, and what happens when users try to turn it off. Security researchers and user advocacy groups discovered that Microsoft fundamentally changed how OneDrive activates starting in mid-2024. When you set up a new Windows 11 computer or perform a clean installation, the process now prompts you to sign in with a Microsoft account. Microsoft made bypassing this requirement increasingly difficult, requiring obscure workarounds that average users would never discover. Once you complete setup with a Microsoft account, OneDrive folder backup activates automatically. A notification appears in the Action Center suggesting you back up your PC using OneDrive. But by that point, the service has already begun uploading your desktop, pictures, documents, music, and videos folders to Microsoft servers. Tech news site NeoWin reported in June 2024 that users completing clean Windows 11 installations were being surprised by OneDrive desktop icons and drive folders appearing on their newly installed operating systems without explicit opt-in. Tom's Hardware confirmed Microsoft now forces automatic OneDrive backups, with the feature enabled during clean Windows installs. Users who intended to start with a completely clean system discovered their files were already uploading, before they realized what was happening. The critical issue centers on consent. Legal analysts examining Microsoft's implementation note that while users technically agree to terms during Windows setup, those agreements span dozens of pages of dense legal language. The specific behavior of OneDrive is buried within documentation that consumer protection advocates say fails the plain language test. Reddit communities dedicated to privacy reported in 2024 that Windows 11 was automatically enabling OneDrive folder backup without asking permission. Users who had previously disabled OneDrive found the service reactivated after major Windows updates. The pattern repeated across feature updates throughout 2024 and into 2025. The situation escalates dramatically when users attempt to disable OneDrive backup. Author Jason Pargin described the experience in a January 2026 post that technology news site Slashdot, featured under the headline, "Everyone Hates OneDrive, Microsoft's cloud app that steals then deletes all your files." Pargin outlined the core problem in stark terms. When you turn off OneDrive backup, the feature can delete your local files, leaving behind only a desktop icon asking, "Where are my files?" Users can re-download their files from Microsoft servers, but the nightmare doesn't end there. If you then attempt to delete Microsoft's cloud copies to reclaim storage space or maintain privacy, OneDrive triggers another deletion of the local files you just downloaded. The only workaround requires hunting down YouTube tutorials that walk through buried menu options, none of which clearly describe their function in plain English. Pargin compared the experience to a ransomware attack, and legal analysts say that comparison isn't hyperbole. Ransomware encrypts your files and demands payment for the key. OneDrive takes your files, uploads them to Microsoft servers, then creates a situation where disabling the service or managing cloud storage can trigger local file deletion. Both scenarios leave users without access to their data unless they comply with demands. User forums document countless cases of this exact pattern. One Slashdot commenter described OneDrive as a pernicious virus created by Microsoft that intentionally steals your data and then limits your access to it. Another reported that OneDrive automatically re-enabled itself after a Windows feature release update, then backed up temporary files and used up all the free storage, triggering notifications demanding paid upgrades. Technical support communities on Reddit show users desperate for help after OneDrive was activated, uploaded their files, and then deleted local copies when they tried to disable it. Multiple users report that even after carefully following disable instructions, subsequent Windows updates reactivated OneDrive and repeated the cycle. Privacy advocates and legal analysts examining OneDrive's behavior raise serious questions about compliance with consumer protection laws. Organizations operating in the European Union must comply with GDPR, which requires explicit consent for data processing, clear transparency about what happens to user data, and the ability to withdraw consent at any time without penalty. Legal experts analyzing OneDrive's automatic activation note several potential violations. First, the purpose limitation principle requires that data collected for one purpose cannot be used for another without new consent. When OneDrive automatically uploads files that users stored locally for privacy reasons, then makes those files available for Microsoft's other services, it potentially violates the purpose limitation. Second, GDPR Article 7 requires that consent must be withdrawable at any time and without disadvantage. A system that deletes your local files when you attempt to withdraw consent by disabling OneDrive arguably imposes a significant disadvantage, potentially violating this core principle. Consumer protection advocates in the United States point to similar concerns under state laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act. While CCPA doesn't require opt-in consent as strictly as GDPR, it does require clear disclosure of data collection practices and the ability to opt out without penalty. The file deletion behavior when disabling OneDrive could constitute an unlawful penalty for exercising privacy rights. Legal analysts describe Microsoft's OneDrive practices as dark patterns, manipulative design techniques that steer users toward choices beneficial to the company rather than the user. Mozilla published research highlighting how Microsoft uses dark patterns in promoting the Edge browser. Similar techniques appear in OneDrive. No regulatory agency has filed formal charges against Microsoft, specifically for OneDrive's behavior as of January 2026. However, legal scholars note that enforcement often lags behind technology by years. The consequences extend far beyond inconvenience. Security researchers outline scenarios where OneDrive's automatic activation creates genuine harm. Consider a small business owner who maintains client files locally for data sovereignty reasons, perhaps because clients require that sensitive information never leave specific geographic boundaries. When OneDrive activates during a Windows update and begins uploading those files to Microsoft's cloud servers, which may be located in different countries, the business owner may unknowingly violate contractual obligations and data protection regulations. Imagine a domestic violence survivor who stores documents, including legal records and new addresses, on a computer set to local-only storage for security reasons. If OneDrive activates and syncs those files to a cloud account that becomes compromised or is inadvertently shared through family account features, the survivor's carefully protected information could become accessible to the very person they're hiding from. Survivors advocates emphasize that cloud services, when activated without a full understanding, create new vectors for abusers to access location information. For a journalist working with confidential sources in countries with authoritarian government, OneDrive's automatic activation could be catastrophic. Files documenting source communications, if uploaded to Microsoft's cloud, become subject to government data requests under laws like the U.S. Cloud Act, which allows U.S. law enforcement to compel Microsoft to hand over data even when stored on foreign servers. A journalist who carefully kept those files local to avoid cloud exposure might not realize OneDrive uploaded them until a source faces arrest. Healthcare providers using Windows computers to store patient notes face HIPAA violations if OneDrive uploads protected health information to the cloud without proper business associate agreements. A therapist who assumes files saved to the local documents folder remain on the local computer might violate federal law when OneDrive silently syncs those notes to Microsoft servers. The common thread in all these scenarios is the same. OneDrive removes user agency and creates risks that users specifically tried to avoid by choosing local storage. After mounting criticism throughout 2024, Microsoft made some adjustments to OneDrive's behavior, though user advocates argue these changes address symptoms rather than root causes. In mid-2024, technology news site Thurrott reported that Microsoft was silently reversing some OneDrive enhancements in Windows 11. The changes Microsoft implemented remain insufficient according to user feedback. OneDrive still activates automatically during Windows setup if you use a Microsoft account, which itself has become nearly mandatory for Windows 11 Home Edition. Most critically, the file deletion behavior when disabling OneDrive persists for many users. Microsoft's official support documentation provides instructions for disabling OneDrive folder backup, but those instructions require navigating to OneDrive settings, finding Sync and Backup, clicking Manage Backup, and then individually disabling each folder. Users report the wording remains confusing, and the consequences of each choice aren't explained in plain language. Multiple users report that even after following official disable procedures, Windows feature updates reactivate OneDrive without notice. Microsoft provides no persistent opt-out that survives updates. The storage limit trap continues to frustrate users. OneDrive comes with 5 GB of free storage, far too little for users whose entire desktop and documents folders get uploaded. Once you hit the limit, Microsoft sends persistent notifications urging you to upgrade to a paid plan. Users who never wanted OneDrive in the first place find themselves marketed to for a problem Microsoft created. Perhaps most concerning, Microsoft has not implemented a true opt-in model. An opt-in system would present OneDrive as a choice during setup with clear yes or no options, would activate only after explicit user confirmation, and would never reactivate after being disabled. You can protect yourself from OneDrive's automatic activation, but it requires multiple steps and ongoing monitoring. For users setting up a new Windows computer, the most effective protection is avoiding a Microsoft account entirely. During Windows 11 setup, when prompted to sign in with a Microsoft account, you can bypass this requirement using specific methods. For Windows 11 Home, the most reliable bypass involves disconnecting from the internet before starting setup, which forces Windows to offer a local account option. Creating a local-only account prevents OneDrive from activating automatically because the service requires a Microsoft account to function. If you already use a Microsoft account and want to disable OneDrive completely, start by unlinking your PC from the service. Click the OneDrive Cloud icon in your system tray, which might be hidden under the Show Hidden Icons arrow. Click the gear icon to open Settings, select the Account tab, and click Unlink this PC. Go to Task Manager Startup tab and verify OneDrive remains disabled. For advanced users comfortable with registry editing, you can implement a registry key that prevents OneDrive installation entirely. Navigate to HKey Local, Machine Software Policies, Microsoft Windows OneDrive, create a new doored value named Disable File Sync NGSC and set it to 1. However, registry editing carries risks, so attempt this only if you understand the consequences. Your computer is supposed to be your tool, working according to your preferences and protecting your data according to your choices. Instead, OneDrive turns your next week. We're investigating another Microsoft feature that activates by default and collects more data than its privacy policy clearly explains. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The biggest tech companies in the world are counting on you being too busy to notice what they're doing with your files. Prove them wrong. If this content resonated with you, do like, share it forward, and subscribe to receive timely updates on the future of technology.